I remember the fall like a flash of lightning, bright, fast, and cruel. 1 second I was on the staircase, carrying the folded laundry upstairs, and the next the world tilted. My body slammed against the wooden steps, the air punched out of my lungs, and everything went white. When I opened my eyes, I was lying at the bottom of the stairs. The basket toppled beside me. My right wrist burned, and my hip throbbed like it had its own heartbeat. The house was quiet for a moment. Then I heard her voice. "Oh my God, she fell again!" It was my daughter-in-law, Lisa. That syrupy, dramatic tone she reserved for moments when she wanted to sound innocent. I blinked up at the ceiling, trying to remember how it happened. Did I trip? No. I felt a shove. Light, but firm enough to send me off balance. My son, David, came rushing in from the living room. His face was pale, his eyes wide with panic. Mom, what happened?" Lisa knelt beside him, hand over her chest. "She must have missed a step, honey. I told you we should have added those rail grips." I tried to speak, but my mouth was dry. My wrist screamed in pain when I tried to move. I didn't fall," I whispered, but my voice came out cracked, weak. "What do you mean, Mom?" David leaned closer. Lisa touched his arm. "She's confused, David. She's in shock." Her words cut deeper than the pain in my bones. Confused. That's what she'd been calling me lately, behind my back, sometimes to my face. Forgetful, frail, confused. The paramedics arrived within minutes. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, Lisa leaned toward one of them and whispered, "She's been having these balance problems lately. I keep telling her to use the railings, but she forgets." Her voice was honeyed concern, perfectly rehearsed. I wanted to scream the truth, that she'd pushed me, but something in her expression made me stay silent. It was the way she smiled at me, a small curve at the corner of her lips that said, "Go ahead, no one will believe you." The hospital was cold, all metal rails and antiseptic air. They said I had a sprained wrist and bruised ribs, but nothing broken. Lucky, they said. I didn't feel lucky. David stayed by my bedside, holding my hand, worry written all over him. Lisa sat in the corner, scrolling on her phone, sighing dramatically every few minutes. When the nurse came in with the discharge papers, Lisa jumped up. "We'll handle everything," she said, taking the clipboard before I could even reach for it. "I'll make sure she rests." "Lisa," I murmured, "I can sign my own papers." "Oh, Mom, don't be stubborn," she said with a laugh, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You've had a long day. Let me help." David smiled faintly. "She's just trying to make things easier, Mom." Easier. That word stung. Because ever since I'd moved in with them after my husband passed, Lisa had been trying to make things easier for me by rearranging my kitchen drawers, managing my mail, even deciding what time I should take my pills. And David, he didn't see it. He saw only the helpful wife, not the controlling, conniving woman behind the smile. That night, they took me home. David carried my bag. Lisa fussed about the stairs. "Maybe you should stay downstairs for a while," she suggested sweetly. "You know, just until you get your strength back. I don't want another accident." I met her eyes. "It wasn't an accident," I said quietly. She froze just for a second. Then her smile returned, tighter this time. "Of course it wasn't, dear. You're just tired." Later, I lay awake on the couch, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the dark. Every breath hurt, but what hurt more was knowing that my own son believed her version of the story. As I drifted into uneasy sleep, I heard her voice again, soft, muffled, but clear enough. She was in the kitchen, whispering into her phone. "If she looks frail enough, maybe it's time for the nursing home." My blood ran cold. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't an accident. It was a plan, and I was going to find a way to prove it. The days after the fall blurred together. Long, quiet hours that stretched between the couch and the kitchen. My wrist was wrapped in a stiff white brace, and my ribs ached every time I breathed too deep. But pain wasn't what kept me up at night. It was her voice. Lisa's gentle, patronizing tone echoed through the house. "Be careful, Mom. Don't strain yourself." "Maybe let me handle that. You've done enough." Every word wrapped in sugar, every glance filled with pity. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was too sensitive. After all, I'd moved in with them to make things easier for everyone. The house had enough room. I'd sold my own place after my husband passed. Too many memories, too many stairs. I gave David a portion of the sale to help with his mortgage. "You'll always have a home here, Mom," he'd said back then. I'd believed him. Now, it didn't feel like my home at all. A week after the fall, Lisa started moving my things. She said it was for convenience. My sewing basket vanished from the living room. My medicine organizer ended up on a different shelf every day. Even my reading glasses would disappear for hours, only to be found later by her with a smile. "Oh, here they are. You must have left them in the laundry again." But I knew I hadn't. I tried telling David once. "Lisa keeps moving my things around," I said carefully over dinner. He frowned, setting down his fork. "Mom, she's just trying to help. You know how the fall scared her." "She's the reason I fell," I said before I could stop myself. His eyes hardened. "Mom, don't say things like that." There it was, the line I wasn't allowed to cross. Lisa reached across the table, placing her hand on his. "It's okay, honey. The doctor said confusion is common after a shock. Let's just stay calm." Confusion. Again. That word was becoming her weapon. It wasn't just David she was working on. She started planting little seeds everywhere. When neighbors dropped by, she'd mention how forgetful I'd been lately. "Oh, she left the stove on last week. Thank God I caught it. She forgot the mail outside for 3 days." None of it true, but people nodded sympathetically. The poor old widow. The worst part? She always said it while smiling at me like it was harmless chatter, like she was protecting me. Every lie she told built another layer of doubt around me. I could see it in David's eyes, every time I hesitated to find a word, every time I looked tired. He was starting to believe her story. And that terrified me. One afternoon, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. The tone of their voices was low, conspiratorial. I stayed just out of sight, heart pounding. "She's not herself anymore," Lisa whispered. "I think we should look into assisted living before something worse happens." David sighed. "I just don't know if she'll agree." "She doesn't have to," Lisa said softly. "It's for her own good." Her own good. The same phrase people use before they take away your choices. That evening, I sat alone on the porch watching the sunset burn gold over the neighbors' rooftops. My husband used to sit there with me every night. "Don't ever let anyone treat you like you're less, Margaret," he'd say. "Not even family." I thought about those words for a long time. When I went back inside, Lisa was in the hallway pretending to dust a picture frame. She smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Everything okay, Mom? You look tired again. Maybe skip the stairs tonight." I looked at her. Really looked at her. The fake concern, the careful control, and I realized this wasn't random. She wanted me out of the way. That night, as I lay awake, I noticed something I hadn't before. A faint red glow coming from the corner near the stairs. A small, steady blink. My heart skipped. The security camera. My husband had installed it years ago after we were robbed. I hadn't paid it much attention since, but if it was still working... For the first time in days, I felt something other than fear. I felt purpose. I whispered into the darkness, a promise to myself. "You want to make me look weak. Let's see how strong you look on camera." The next morning, I woke before the sun. The house was still, wrapped in that soft gray quiet that comes before dawn. My ribs still ached when I sat up, but the faint red blink from the hallway had burned itself into my mind all night. I shuffled toward the stairs, clutching the rail. There it was, the small black dome above the frame, dusty but alive. My husband Robert had been a careful man. He never trusted just locks. A house should have eyes, he used to say. I smiled through the ache in my chest. Maybe after all this time, those eyes had seen what really happened. The camera's control box was in the study. I hadn't touched it since Robert's passing. When I turned it on, the screen flickered, humming weakly. A small green light blinked to life and my heart began to race. "Please, let it have recorded." The files were labeled by date. My hands trembled as I scrolled to the day of the fall. There it was, 08/17, 7:42 p.m. I clicked play. For a second, nothing happened. Then the familiar staircase appeared on screen. I saw myself, small and slow in my gray sweater, carrying that basket of laundry. Lisa was behind me, saying something I couldn't hear. I saw her hand reach out, just a gentle touch on my back, then a firm push. I gasped. My body lurched forward on the screen, tumbling down the steps. The laundry basket flew into the air. Lisa stepped back, froze for half a second, then ran down, putting on her act. Oh my God, she fell again! I watched it 3 times, 4. Each time I felt the same cold flood of disbelief. The truth was there, plain, pixelated, undeniable. I pressed my hand over my mouth and whispered, "You did this. You really did this. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't my imagination." She had pushed me. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the paused frame, her face halfway between guilt and performance. The woman my son trusted, the woman I'd welcomed into my home, had tried to make me look weak, maybe worse. Anger came next. Not loud, but quiet and sharp, like a knife being honed. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just whispered, "Thank you, Robert." He'd always said truth finds its way out. Now it was sitting right in front of me. By the time the sun rose, I'd already copied the footage onto a small USB drive I found in the drawer. I tucked it into my cardigan pocket like a secret weapon. When Lisa came downstairs an hour later, her hair perfectly curled and her tone perfectly sweet, I was already sitting at the kitchen table with my tea. "Good morning, Mom," she said brightly. "How are we feeling today? I hope you rested." I smiled at her for the first time in days. "I did, thank you. Slept like a baby." She blinked, studying me, suspicious of my calm. She was used to me being quiet and hesitant, not this. "I was thinking," I said, sipping my tea, "maybe we should go over those safety changes you wanted to make around the house." "Oh, sure," she said quickly. "I can help with that after I run a few errands. You know, I just want to make sure nothing like that fall happens again." I met her eyes and let a tiny smile slip. "Oh, it won't." She frowned, a flicker of confusion. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. I just looked at her, really looked, and she turned away first. When David came home that evening, I asked him to sit with me after dinner. Lisa tried to join, but I said gently, "No, dear, I'd like to talk to my son alone." She hesitated, eyes darting between us, then forced a smile. "Of course, I'll be in the living room." David looked nervous. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Yes," I said softly. "In fact, I think it's time I showed you something." I reached for the small USB drive in my pocket and placed it on the table. He frowned. "What's this?" "The truth," I said. "Play it when you're alone." That night, after they both went upstairs, I sat on the porch in the quiet again. The stars looked sharper somehow, the air cooler. For the first time since the fall, I wasn't afraid anymore. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew this. The days of her whispering lies in my son's ear were numbered. Because I finally had the proof. And I was done being silent. The following evening, David came home late from work. I was sitting in the living room, knitting quietly, pretending to watch the news. Lisa was at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone, half listening. "Hey, Mom," David said, loosening his tie. "Did you eat?" "I did," I replied with a small smile. "There's soup on the stove if you're hungry." He nodded absently, glancing at the floor. His shoulders looked heavier than usual. Then I saw it. His hand slipped into his pocket, and I knew what he'd found there. The USB drive. "David," I said softly, "did you watch it?" He froze. The air between us went still. Even Lisa looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. Yeah, he said finally, his voice low. "I watched it." Silence. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the room. Lisa's tone snapped bright and defensive. "Watched what?" David turned to her slowly. His face had gone pale. "You know what?" Her phone dropped onto the counter with a clatter. I don't understand. What's going on?" I folded my hands over my lap and said evenly, "Why don't you tell him, Lisa? Or should I?" She blinked rapidly, then laughed. A short, nervous sound. "Mom, what are you talking about? You're scaring me." "Enough," David said sharply. I saw it." The color drained from her face. He stepped closer, his voice trembling with disbelief. You pushed her. You pushed my mother down the stairs. Lisa's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. It wasn't like that. She lost her balance. I was trying to... He slammed his hand on the table. Don't lie to me. I saw it, Lisa. I saw you shove her. I sat still, watching it all unfold, not with glee, but with a deep, quiet sorrow, the kind that comes when truth finally claws its way into the light. Lisa's tears came next, predictable and practiced. David, please, you have to believe me. It was an accident, I swear. I didn't mean to... You let everyone think she was senile, David said, his voice breaking. You told the neighbors she was losing it. You wanted me to think she couldn't take care of herself. Her face twisted with desperation. I was trying to protect you. She's manipulative. She's turning you against me. I finally spoke, my voice calm but edged with steel. No, dear, you did that all by yourself. Lisa turned to me, eyes wet and wild. You don't understand. You've always treated me like an outsider. That's not true, I said softly. I gave you my home, my time, my trust. You wanted more. You wanted control. But you forgot one thing. She frowned. What? The house has eyes. The room went still. Even David looked up at me, realizing I meant more than just the camera. Lisa's expression hardened, tears drying into anger. You can't do this to me, she hissed. You think he'll believe everything you say now? You're old, you're... David cut her off, his voice rising. Stop talking. She flinched. He pointed toward the door. I want you out tonight. Her jaw dropped. David, you can't... He didn't look at her. Pack your things. Go to your mother's. I can't even look at you right now. Lisa's composure cracked. She stormed past me, muttering curses under her breath, slamming cabinets, dragging suitcases down the hall. When the front door finally shut, the house went silent again. David stood there, staring at the floor. Mom, he whispered, I'm so sorry. I didn't see it. I should have known. I reached for his hand. You couldn't have known, sweetheart. She's clever, too clever. His eyes filled with tears. I let her treat you like you were losing your mind. I squeezed his fingers. She wanted you to think that, but you know now. That's what matters. We sat together for a long time, the quiet between us heavy but healing. The years of trust she'd chipped away at began to mend piece by piece. Finally, I said, There's one more thing I have to do. He looked at me, confused. What do you mean? I need to make sure she doesn't come back. And though I said it softly, there was something in my tone that made him realize I wasn't just talking about locking the door. That night, after he went upstairs, I opened my notebook. My husband's lawyer's card was still tucked inside. Tomorrow, I would make the call. I'd spent weeks being made to feel small, helpless, and old. Now it was my turn to remind her. I might be aging, but I'm not done yet. The next morning, the house felt different. Quieter, cleaner. Even the air seemed lighter, like the walls were finally allowed to breathe again. Lisa's perfume still lingered faintly in the hallway, a sharp synthetic sweetness that clung to the curtains, but the voice that came with it, that constant hum of condescension and control, was gone. David left early for work. He said he needed to clear his head. I understood. Seeing someone's true face after years of trust, it rearranges your world. As soon as I heard his car pull away, I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and opened my notebook. The lawyer's card lay inside, exactly where I'd left it all those years ago after Robert passed. Harold T. Emerson, attorney at law, a kind, sharp man who had helped Robert and me set up our estate. It was time. I dialed the number, and to my surprise, Harold himself answered. Mrs. Bennett, he said warmly, it's been a long time. Yes, I replied, steadying my voice, and it seems I've let the wrong people handle too much in my absence. By noon, I was sitting in Harold's office, the security footage on a small flash drive in my purse. He listened quietly as I told him everything. The fall, the lies, the manipulation, the proof. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. You've been through quite a lot, Margaret, but you did the right thing, keeping that evidence. This changes everything. I don't want to ruin anyone, I said softly, but I won't be treated like a fool in my own home. He nodded. Then let's make sure that never happens again. Within an hour, we'd done it. I revoked the joint access Lisa had insisted on for my accounts. Accounts she'd convinced me to simplify months ago. We updated my will, removed both their names from any inheritance connected to the house, added protective clauses, transferred everything into a living trust under my sole authority. From now on, Harold said, sliding the documents toward me, no one makes a move on your behalf without your direct consent. I signed every page with deliberate, unshaking strokes. My hand hurt by the end, but it was a good pain, a reclaiming pain. Before I left, Harold looked at me and said, "You have every right to press charges, you know." "I know," I said, "and I will, if she comes near me again." That evening, David came home looking worn, his face shadowed by guilt and exhaustion. "She called me," he said quietly. I looked up from my chair. "And?" "She begged me to forgive her, said she just lost her temper that night." His jaw tightened. "Said you were trying to destroy our marriage." I sighed. "And what do you believe?" He met my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I saw the little boy I'd raised, the one who used to run home crying when someone lied about him, who always sought truth, even when it hurt. "I believe you, Mom." I smiled softly. "Then that's all I need." He hesitated. "What are you going to do?" "I already did," I said simply. "She has no access to my money, no claim to this house, and no power to make decisions for me. That's over." He looked startled. "You, already?" "Yes." I folded my hands in my lap. She tried to make me look weak. I let her think she succeeded long enough to show her what real strength looks like. He was quiet for a while, then whispered, "I don't know how you do it." I chuckled softly, because when you've lived as long as I have, you learn the power of patience. Revenge doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be final. Later that night, there was a knock on the door. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Lisa stood on the porch, eyes puffy, voice trembling. "Margaret, please, can we talk?" I opened the door just a few inches. "No, Lisa, talking time's over." Her lower lip quivered. "You called the lawyer, didn't you? You're ruining everything." I stared at her through the narrow crack. "No, dear, you ruined it the day you decided to push me down those stairs." For a moment, her mask slipped, rage flashing through her eyes like lightning. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I already did," I replied, and gently closed the door. The next morning, an officer served her with a restraining order. The papers had Harold's signature at the bottom. As I sat by the window, the sunlight warm against my face, I realized something. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about peace. Lisa had wanted to strip away my dignity. Instead, she taught me to guard it like treasure. And for the first time in months, I felt truly safe. 2 weeks passed before the house truly felt like home again. The silence no longer frightened me. It soothed me. The ticking clock in the hallway, the hum of the old refrigerator, the rustle of the curtains in the afternoon breeze, all the ordinary sounds of peace I'd forgotten how to hear. I started keeping fresh flowers on the kitchen counter again. Small things, lavender, daisies, sometimes roses when I felt indulgent. It was my little declaration that I was still here, still capable, still alive. The bruise on my ribs had faded to yellow. My wrist had mostly healed, but some aches never quite leave. They just settle deeper where the world can't see them. David didn't come by for several days after the restraining order. I didn't push. He needed time to untangle what she'd done to him, the quiet, daily poisoning of trust. When he finally showed up, it was a Sunday afternoon. I was on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sparrows bicker over breadcrumbs. His car door shut softly, like he was afraid of breaking something fragile. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. I smiled. "Hi, sweetheart." He stood there awkwardly, hands in his pockets, eyes glassy. "You look good." "I feel good," I said, and it was true. He sat down beside me. For a while, we said nothing, just watched the yard, the shifting light, the little bits of dust that glimmered in the air. Then he said, "She told everyone I abandoned her." I took a slow sip of tea. Let her talk. The truth doesn't need defending, it just needs time. He nodded, eyes fixed on the floorboards. "I don't know how I missed it all, Mom. The way she talked to you, the things she said. You wanted to believe the best in her," I said gently. "That's not weakness, it's love." He looked at me, and his face crumpled. "I let her treat you like you were losing your mind. I didn't even—" "David," I interrupted softly, touching his hand. "I forgive you." He swallowed hard, tears gathering in his eyes. "How can you?" "Because I remember the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the yard and tell me they were gold. That boy's still in there. He just got lost for a while." He let out a shaky laugh, wiping his eyes. "I don't deserve you." "Maybe not," I teased, smiling, "but you're stuck with me anyway." After that day, things slowly began to mend. He started coming by more often, fixing things, bringing groceries, sometimes just sitting quietly with me. It wasn't the same as before, but maybe that was for the best. There was a new honesty between us now, a fragile, beautiful truth born out of pain. Lisa tried to contact him once more through his work email. He showed me the message. It was all apologies and excuses, the kind of words that mean nothing when they come from someone who only feels sorry they got caught. I looked at him and said, "You don't owe her anything." He nodded, deleted the email, and that was the end of it. A month later, I stood at the top of those same stairs where it all began. The morning sun poured through the window, lighting the steps like gold. I ran my hand along the rail. Steady, solid, sure. No fear this time, just peace. As I turned to head downstairs, I caught sight of the security camera, still blinking faintly. I smiled at it. "Good job, old friend," I whispered. "You did your part." Then I walked to the living room, poured myself another cup of tea, and opened my journal. I began writing, not just about the fall, but about everything that came after. The betrayal, the silence, the power I found when I stopped doubting myself. Because women like me, we've lived long enough to know that sometimes the quietest voice in the room carries the most strength. If I've learned anything, it's this. Age doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise enough to fight differently. Lisa thought she could make me look old and helpless. She forgot that I've lived through harder things, loss, grief, rebuilding, and I'm still standing. She wanted the world to see me as fragile. Instead, she showed them what resilience looks like. I leaned back in my chair, watching the afternoon sun spill across the floorboards, and I smiled to myself. "Let them talk," I murmured. "I've got the truth and my peace. That's enough."